Good afternoon, everybody. Going to be a quick recap of the trades that you could have taken today. Some pretty solid structure across the board from today on ES and NASDAQ. Some high strike rate patterns, even though we had a lot of chop from the FOMC. So let's take a look at the daily snapshot here, then we'll get into the exact trades that you could have taken. So starting off with the daily on ES, we were down about... actually up 1 point, funny enough, almost exactly at break even. We're up about 0.02%. Not a whole lot of movement on the FOMC today. You are hanging out below the low of yesterday, just barely. You kind of have a little bit of a sweep of it. If it does continue lower, we're still looking for that rollover gap, which you can't actually see on the daily here. If you go down to a lower time frame, you can see that rollover gap. It's right around the 80s. Which is still that daily level that we've been watching for quite a while now, that prior high. So on Friday, tomorrow is a holiday. On Friday, if we do start to pull back, look for that 80 level as a potential rollover gap fill. NASDAQ, that same rollover level, let's go down to a lower time frame here, would be around 655, so keep an eye on that one. But as we can see today, it didn't really do a whole lot. It is almost exactly at break even. It's only up 3 points right now. So not a whole lot of movement on that candle. We did sweep the low of yesterday, but it hasn't really gotten a lot of buy pressure after that sweep. As far as other markets go, pretty flat across the board. You have a decent movement on Bitcoin. Bitcoin down 0.8%. Funny enough, oil is still pretty flat, even though you have the crisis, the conflict, whatever you want to call it, the war going on in the Middle East. Gold is down about 1%. So decent moves on gold and Bitcoin. That's about it. All right, taking a look at what we were looking for today and how it played out. So for today, we were looking for holding above 68. We wanted to see 102 and 140. Holding below 68, you're looking for a rotation down to 33. Below 33, we're looking for 11 and 81. You didn't really hold outside of that range. So the range from 68 to 33, our above level and our below level, was held pretty much the entire day. And you can see we kind of just chopped through those levels. After the FOMC, it did go for a bit of a sell-off, trying to hold below that 33 level, but it did quickly reclaim that back into VWAP. NASDAQ, we were looking for holding above 22,010, looking for 131 and 221. Holding below that, we're looking for a rotation down to 866, and then below that, 778, 653. You did break out of this choppy value from yesterday a little bit, but then you kind of just chopped around these two levels here. So holding below that 22,010, chopped into 866. So same thing on ES. You weren't able to break out of our trigger levels. Now let's take a look at some trades you could have taken today. So the first trade was a couple of different variations. You could have taken the 30-minute sweep. You did sweep the low around 41. You could have taken it as a bear flag into VWAP, which actually ended up losing. It was a very clean bear flag into VWAP around 940, but unfortunately, there was a headline that came out that was pretty bullish. They were kind of talking about different peace talks with Iran. And from that point on, you were basically just straight up. But let me show you the pattern that we had when it broke VWAP. If we go back to the 5-minute, this was nearly a perfect bulldog. And let me actually go to TradingView. This will be a little easier to see on TradingView. So what we look for on a bulldog is we look for a bottom, a kind of curved back accumulation, and then a double bottom, and then it pops up, and then it puts in a pullback. And that pullback should typically stay around where that accumulation was. You don't want it to go too deep. You want it to be a little bull flag, right? A little miniature bull flag. And it's called a bulldog because it looks like a dog, right? If we imagine that's the tail, that's the back, that's the head. So typically with the bulldog, once the back has been used as support on that pullback, you can look for an entry. If you guys were watching my live stream this morning, we talked about that entry at around 50. So I was saying if it didn't hold 50, you would have looked for a pullback into VWAP, which at the time was around 45. So either a pullback into 50 or a pullback into 45 would have been your buy trigger there. Now, NASDAQ pretty much had the same pattern. Let me show you. There's a little bit of a difference on NQ. The difference on NQ is it swept that low. So instead of seeing a double bottom, you had a sweep. But then the pullback was the same. So that pullback you still could have bought, and then it had a very strong uptrend. I would not call this a vertical distribution. This was a very strong uptrend up until, let me see here, up until about 1040, 1050. And then also on stream, I was talking about a rollover in momentum. It wasn't exactly a rollover top. It was just a rollover in momentum. And let me show you what I meant by that. If we look at the 1 minute here on the Momo indicator, the one that I created for momentum, pretty strong momentum all the way up. A little bit of a trap there on that bulldog head, which is exactly what you want to see. And then on the high here, look at our momentum. It's falling off rapidly. So you had a peak right here, which is right here. Then you had a lower peak here, which is right here. So a little bit of a bear div. Price is rising, but our momentum is falling off a cliff here. So you didn't exactly have a bear div on Delta. You did have a small bear div. It's kind of an exaggerated div. But you had a very obvious divergence on the momentum. So that's why I say it's a rollover top in momentum, but not exactly our rollover top pattern. With our rollover top pattern, we look for that uptrend and then kind of a high and then a little bit of a weak high and then a lower high. You didn't really have that here. You could kind of argue that maybe that was a high, maybe that was the weak high, maybe that was the lower high. But we look for it typically to all happen within the same ABC, right? Very close together. So once that rollover happened, if you were in that long from the bulldog, your trails would have been hit. And then you kind of had a bearish trade. If you were not in the bullish trade, you probably would have entered somewhere around that high. If you were in the bullish trade and you wanted to flip, it probably would have been somewhere around there, because that was the confirmation with that lower high. But if you weren't in the bullish trade, probably that bear div in momentum would have been a good enough trigger to take that to the downside. And then obviously stop loss above the highs. And then our targets were pretty obvious, just like VWAP, and then possibly the point of origin, which you didn't really get until way back until 130. So you did get VWAP. Your VWAP targets were hit beautifully. And by the way, that was also single prints. We had single prints going down to 60. So another reason to take that as a short when that momentum was selling, or sorry, the momentum was dropping. You had a 30-minute sweep, which was also an absorption. We talked about that on the live stream. You also had the single prints that needed to be filled in. And then you were just completely rolling over on the 1 minute and on the momentum. So very obvious targets and a very obvious loss in momentum. And then after that, you could have traded the fill in on the single prints bullishly. It did give you about a 10-point bounce. So once you filled these in, you bounced for about 10 points. And then a couple of bearish headlines came out. Some bearish headlines came out kind of saying that the peace talks were not happening. And then new 30-minute low, new low, new low, new low. And then you just had 30-minute lows pretty much until the FOMC. And then during the FOMC, we put in our 5-minute low around 47, our 5-minute high at 72. You never broke the 5-minute high, so you were bearish pretty much the entire time. You had a couple of back tests of that 5-minute range. And let me go down to a 5-minute. I'll show you what I mean here. So here was our 5-minute low, which was way back here at 2 o'clock. What I do is I take the first 5-minute candle. So 2 o'clock to 2:05. And then right here we had the breakdown of that 5-minute level, 5-minute low. Then we had the retest here. Gave you a pretty decent pullback, about 10 points. Another retest here. Gave you a serious pullback, about 20 points. And then we closed after failing it one more time. Pulled back into that 5-minute low one more time, and then gave you another pullback of about 20 points. So that FOMC 5-minute range, that first 5-minute high or that 5-minute low, where are we building value, right? You want to see if you're building value above it, if you're building value below it, who's in control. Today was a good example of the bears being in control pretty much the entire time. So you retested the low 3 times, and you failed every time. But all right, guys, that is it for this recap. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Hit that like button. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace, everybody.